Now, I want to talk about man's best friend. They can be cute and cuddly, as we know, but sadly, this is not always the case. Recently, we have seen a number of dog attacks, many dogs exposed to life's cruel side, abused and neglected, becoming aggressive and dangerous, a public health risk to so many throughout our community. Today, KPRC2 is embarking on a data-driven assignment to identify and document dog attacks within our area. This is a problem, a big problem, that could be stopped before it starts, as there are so many layers to this issue. We're talking about being a responsible pet owner, spaying and neutering your pets, vaccinations, and animal control. Joining me right now to talk about the problem and solutions is Lisa Tynan, Marketing and Special Events Specialist with Houston Pet Set. Thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
Hello, you brought with you
Evie.
I know, she's
nervous
Nellie.
I know, she'll just sit here and tremble.
Evie or Evie?
Yes, Evie.
Evie. Well, you know, thank you again for coming in to talk about this. I do want to start with talking about how bad, I don't know if bad's the correct word, how big of a extensive, how big of a crisis stray dogs, that population here in Houston.
It touches so many different parts of the community in so many different ways that it's almost impossible to quantify. You know, we have talked for years about being able to actually get a census of how many stray animals, dogs and cats, are on the street, and it's that no one has come up with a good way to do it because there are so many and the population turns over so quickly. But we do know that shelters are full. Rescues, who are usually there to assist when shelters are full, are also at max capacity. Adoptions are down, surrenders are up, and it's just sort of hard to get a handle on how extensive the crisis is and where to even start to address it.
What is the leading contributing factor, if you will, to dog surrenders, surrendering your pet?
Oh man, it runs the gamut. It really does. You know, the economy is, you know, you just spoke about homelessness and the economy contributing to that. It's the same thing. If you can't feed your own children, how are you going to feed your pets? And so, unfortunately, people end up having to surrender for financial reasons. There is, in fact, a housing crisis, and so many places do not accept either don't accept pets or only accept certain sizes or breeds of dog. And so if you can't find a place to live with your pet, then you have to give them up. And then of course the stray animals on the street are just breeding unchecked, and veterinary care is expensive. And so even if someone wants to get their pet spayed or neutered, sometimes they don't know where to go.
The affordability factor is not obtainable. And then even talking about access to that too, whether it be financial or geographical, you know, it's very challenging. You know, this has been described as a public health risk. What does that mean, and how do we get this addressed?
So it is, we definitely call it a public health crisis, number one, because there have been so many dangerous dog attacks that are deadly, and somehow, despite people losing their lives, we still haven't addressed it head on. But it is important to understand that it is a public health crisis, but only for part of our population here in Houston. You know, we are a very diverse, but unfortunately a very segregated city. And this public health crisis, this animal homelessness crisis, unfortunately, harms our populations, our underserved and under-resourced communities of color far more than other communities. And so we can't only address animal homelessness without also addressing systemic racism and poverty, and all of these things are so inextricably linked that you have to kind of start pulling each thread and solve them all at the same time.
That's a really good point. And with that said, not all communities have the opportunity or access to animal control to solve these problems.
Absolutely, and that is something that we have seen for years. You know, here in the city of Houston, we have BARK, and if you're just outside the city, we have Harris County Animal Control. When you start to get into more of our rural communities, they either have one animal control officer who's responsible for an entire county, or they have nobody.
Zero.
And those are the communities who are screaming for help, seemingly into a void.
You know, I also want to mention, we talked about this at the top of this conversation, recent dog attacks. Those recent dog attacks were not from stray dogs. They were from owned pets.
Yes.
Bring that into the conversation, because I don't want to just, yes, we do have a stray dog population problem here in the city, but we also have a problem with pet ownership, responsible pet ownership. These are dogs who have homes, who have caretakers, but they're lashing out.
Yes.
What does that look like in this landscape of issues?
In this whole landscape. So there are different types of pet ownership, and we know that there's this unbelievably spoiled little dog who has like 13 beds around the house and would rather be inside.
5-course meals.
Exactly, but there are other types of pet ownership that don't look that way, where the animals live outside. Fortunately, we have passed laws recently that mandate how those animals are kept outside, so they have to have access to shelter, and they can't be chained. They can, however, be tethered. It just can't be a chain.
Oh, can't be a chain.
So when we're looking at a lot of these attacks by owned animals, these are dogs who are completely unrestrained. They have no fencing and they have no tether.
They're just roaming.
They're just roaming. And for whatever reason, there are people who think that that is a form of responsible pet ownership. The dog is happy. They get to do whatever they want. But not every dog is friendly. And unfortunately, when owners don't take responsibility and understand how their dogs are affecting their neighbors and their community, we run into these tragedies.
What should people do if they come across a dog that is roaming, or a stray dog, if you're just not sure on what the situation is?
In a perfect world, you would call your local animal control, and they would come and they would pick them up. But we all know, we've seen the news, we've all experienced it personally. Our animal control is in cities and counties is stretched beyond thin, and so they have to prioritize calls, and they will prioritize a dangerous dog call, absolutely. But if you see, a healthy stray dog roaming, they're not going to come get it because they don't have the manpower. So if you are a person who is able to take that dog in temporarily until you can get an appointment at your shelter, please do. If you can't, post about it, network. There are so many little minor ways that you can help if you can't physically take the dog in or the cat into your home. But absent all of those steps, advocate. You gotta remember who your elected officials are and talk to them about the fact that there isn't enough money and there aren't enough people taking care of the problem.
We recently had this conversation with one of the candidates running for mayor here in Houston the day after the election, and I asked this individual, Sheila Jackson Lee, she came on the show, and I said, what are you doing to prioritize this problem that really is impacting not just people who care for pets, who are worried about pets, but really our entire community? This is having an impact on people who do not care for pets in the programs that they do care about. I do want to talk about, this is a really uncomfortable topic for some people, breeds, and what breeds play, how breeds play a role in our issues.
Again, it's all so complicated. I wish there were simple answers. I mentioned this housing crisis. Well, if you look at insurance companies or apartments, they have a list
rental
of dogs.
Properties.
There's a list of dogs they won't allow.
Sizes and breeds.
And so, we advocate address the dog, not the breed, because you can have this, honestly, I'll plug her ears, if we're talking about the most common dogs who bite, it's Chihuahuas and Dachshunds. But when we're looking at people being able to find housing, their dogs get discriminated against. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the presence of people having to emergency surrender their dog to a shelter because they're being evicted. So what we hope that people will understand is that the breed of the dog doesn't necessarily play a role in their temperament. I can speak from a behavior background that it's not just how they're raised and it's not just how they're bred. It's a combination of factors, and if we want to address this crisis in any way, just walk through the shelters. You see a certain type of dog. You see the pitty type, the big blockheads, and they became very popular. And not everybody is ready to own, a 75-pound meatball. And so you end up with people who can't own them, and they end up in the shelters, and then you have this back-end breed discrimination where, well, I can't adopt that dog because my apartment won't let me have it. So it has to be approached from multiple sides.
We have the problem here, but it's like a spider web of how all these are contributing factors. Let's talk about some solutions. Where do we start at tackling a number of these issues?
Well, and you mentioned that not everybody views this as a priority, and that's okay. We're not going to force anybody to care about it. But the people who do, there are levels at which you can get involved. If you can adopt, adopt. If you can't adopt, foster. If you can't foster, volunteer. If you can't volunteer, donate. And then the level beyond that, like I mentioned, is advocacy. And that's, I think, where a lot of people feel helpless. But you can write to your elected officials. You can go to your neighborhood meetings. You can go to town halls. If nobody talks about the problem with the people who can make the decisions, nothing will happen. So there are ways to get involved at every level. As a personal pet owner, take responsibility, get your pets spayed and neutered, vaccinate them, make sure that they are confined to your property if you are letting them outside, and just be considerate of your neighbors and understand not everybody wants to play with your friendly dog roaming down the street.
You know, I'm so glad you brought up your little one here in talking specifically about the breed. If you do look it up, Dachshunds, I do think, lead the pack for, right?
It's Chihuahuas and Dachshunds trade spaces for number one.
Right. They're not, it's not the Pitty, it's not the Rottie, it's not
these guys.
It's these little ones. Tell us about her story.
I would love to. So Evie, we think she's about 5 or 6 years old. We've had her for about 2 years. She was brought into our good friends at Laurel's House. They're a veterinary nonprofit, essentially on the brink of death. And you know, everyone says, oh, that's very traumatic. She was presented laterally, which means she couldn't even lift her head. Right now, she's a whopping 7 pounds, but when she came in, she was about 3.5 pounds. She had been starved and left in a kennel. So she was covered in sores. She had what's called urine scald from sitting in her own waste. She had corneal edema from the ammonia. And for whatever reason, someone put her in a kennel and left her there. So we saw her on social media, and we said, well, we'll foster her and we'll bring her back. And I think we had her for about 2 days. And we're like, we're not giving
foster
this dog
failure,
back.
right?
100%. She's a foster success. She is.
She
is so healthy and happy, and she's an example of, you know, we weren't necessarily ready to adopt a dog, but we thought we could foster and fell in love with her. And not everybody will have that experience, but that's what the joy of fostering is. You can get them ready for their next step into a happy home.
It's an experience to see if you are ready too.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. Well, she's like, you owe me big time, Mom.
So many treats. She's going to get carrots when she gets home.
Oh, she loves carrots.
Yes.
Well, we always appreciate you coming in, what you do on a daily basis. This is a really important conversation that, you know, more of us have to have on a daily basis to get it solved. And so we do appreciate you coming in and spending time with us this morning. Our coverage will continue on this matter throughout the day. We want to remind you, if you had a dangerous encounter with a dog, and again, I kind of want to take the word stray out of this, because it's not just stray dogs here, and we're seeing that so often with recent encounters that it's owned dogs. But if you've had a dangerous encounter with a dog, we want to hear about it. We want you to send us a message by using the form you see inside this article. You can find it on our website, clicktohouston.com.